Hello. Thanks for tuning in to Unmasked and Unfiltered, where we bring you information that you won't see on the mainstream media or the government propaganda outlets. We bring you speakers who have done their own deep dive research. Some of it may be troubling to listen to, some of it may be hard to digest, and that's okay. We simply ask that you go and you do your own research. We will include links to the videos of information that we've shared so that you can do just that. Because as an informed citizenry, we then are able to stand up and fight back and save our republic. So stay tuned and thank you for joining. Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining us on Unmasked and Unfiltered. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Crystal Risotti. She is one of our Purple for Parents supporters in Indiana, and she has been part of our team for a number of years now. And I actually met her several years ago when we were fighting the obscenity exemption in the state of Indiana, and she came and testified with us. And she actually exposed part of this sexual agenda that I wasn't even aware of. So Crystal, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to have you on tonight and to let you have the opportunity to expose this part of the whole sexual perversion that most people are not even aware of. So welcome aboard, and please tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Rhonda. I'm so happy to be here with you. It's been a long time, but I love seeing you every time I do get to. I live in Indianapolis, as everybody knows, probably, but I met Rhonda when she was still in Indiana, and I became part of Purple for Parents, and I thank her so much for the education that I received. And at the time, I was going through kind of a hardship with my son, who decided to into a female at age 27. And he would now be going on 32. He was married to a female at the time, so it doesn't make any sense to me logically, but I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how we got here, because he was raised in church. He had a faith foundation, and so I had to really dig in and figure out what went wrong. And I was shocked at the information I was finding out, because for those who don't know, my son was highly into something called anime and something called manga. He was a gamer. He liked conventions. And so I knew there was something to that, but I didn't know what I was going to find out. So that's what I really made my mission to inform parents of. Because it's a growing industry. It has been growing for a long time. My son was into Pokemon, which is a form of anime and manga and gaming. It's a huge franchise. Everybody knows about Pokemon. So my son started in Pokemon when he was about 3 years old, doing trading cards and things like that. I thought it was a benign game. Little did I know what was in it until a few years ago when I started doing deep dives. It started with Pokemon. Once those things take hold in someone, it progresses, and I'm going to share what the risks are around it. I'm not one that's going to say all manga, all anime, all gaming is bad, but I am a Christian, and I'm going to stand firmly on the fact that a lot of it is, and you won't know it as a parent. And the question becomes then, what are you willing to risk by allowing your kids to be into this? And you'll see a lot of what I'm talking about through the presentation. So thanks for the opportunity, Rhonda.
Yeah, I just want to add, Crystal, before you share your screen and we start going through your presentation, that, several years ago, we flew you down here to Dallas to a conference to go and speak at. And you were the only one who had done any research on this topic. And I think, if I remember right, you were like the talk of the conference, because it woke so many people up to help them realize that there was something more behind this. And so many parents have kids who've gotten caught up in Pokemon and thinking that there was nothing to that. And I would just add that, as you flew back from that conference, you picked up a magazine at the airport, and maybe you'll talk about that tonight and show some pictures out of that. Yeah. And that was disturbing to me, because when I came to your home to pick something up, I took a look at that magazine as we were sitting there talking, and the symbols that were in it were deeply disturbing to me. So why don't we go ahead, and if you want to share your screen, we'll go ahead and get started, and you can go through your presentation.
Okay. I will share now. Speaking briefly on that magazine that I shared with you, I have it with me, and I do have some of the content in the presentation. I do have some screenshots of pictures that are in the book, and that's something I'm going to dwell on a little bit during this presentation. So let's just get started. There's a lot of content, so forgive me for the wordiness, but there's just so much. I'm going to try to fit it in an hour.
Oh, you're
Um,
fine.
so, so this is just a little bit of my perspective, and I firmly believe that when it comes to children, seeds get planted, curiosity takes hold, and then the thoughts which are entertained take root and grow. So, as parents, we need to be very cautious and careful about what seeds are allowed to be planted with our kids. And hopefully, after this presentation, people will be a little more aware of what to look for. Brains aren't fully developed till age 25. You got the garbage in and garbage out method. If kids are taking garbage in, they're going to act out on it because our thoughts become actions. There is a huge influence of LGBTQ plus and fantasy themes in manga and anime. Um, the the kids that are drawn to it are typically high risk kids. So they're the ones that don't fit in typically. And a lot of those are on the autism spectrum or on the ADHD in that range. So there's a reason for that I'll share in a little bit. But parents are just so often unaware of these media. The subculture, I think, is a cult because the point of it, according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, is a great devotion to a person, idea, object, movement, or work. And these kids get so involved in these types of activities that it does become an obsession, a great devotion. The community of others in this subculture are they act like a cult. We already know that about the LGBTQ plus community.
Right.
They'll accept you in, they take you in and they entice you and they say, I know your family won't accept you, but I will. And it becomes this family community, warm, fuzzy unit. And for kids that are outcast or don't quite fit the mold, that's very enticing for them. But let one kid that was in that culture decide to get out of it or detransition, and they have nothing to do with them. They don't want them in their community anymore. They cut them off. They don't want to talk to them. And even the medical field will no longer follow them.
Well,
So
I'm gonna just add real quick, as you mentioned that, Crystal, that is what Walt Heyer talked about in his book,
yes.
Trans Life Survivors, that when they detransition, then they're completely ostracized. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. And so then you don't have good statistics because the medical field is no longer following them. They're not tracking who's detransitioning and following up with them at all. Even the doctors, Chloe Cole talks about that. Once they detransition, they're just kind of cut out of the whole picture. And so the suicide rates, I'm very skeptical of because the LGBTQ plus community promotes the suicide rates being so high because they're trans and because they're ostracized or whatever, not treated well, however you want to put it. However, I believe there's a lot of those suicides that are occurring with detrans kids because the damage has been done. They can't go back. They can't fix anything. Again, it's a cult. So that's just my position, my personal opinion, but it's based on a lot of experience with this and research. I kind of already talked about my story. I'm going to hit on some verses here that I think are very relevant to this. Romans 12:2 is a big one. Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Our minds are important. What we take in is important. The seeds that get planted in your children who their brains aren't fully developed till 25, around 25 years old, um, the things that we're letting them be exposed to, again, are preventing that renewing of the mind. It's taking over the mind. So we have to be careful with that. 2 Corinthians 10:3-6. I'm going to focus on verse 5. Casting down imaginations. This whole subculture is all about imagination. It's all about that. It's living in fantasy. The Bible says you should cast down your imaginations and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bring into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. That verse to me is the mantra for this whole message that I'm giving, because we have to take control of our mind and our thoughts. Kids can't. You as parents have to do it for them. James 1:8, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. You can't toe the line. You can't be in the spiritual world and trying to pursue Christ and be also in the world of fantasy and let your imagination rule you. And then Proverbs 23:7, for as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. When you're living in fantasy, and I experienced this with my son, I would try to have conversations with him when he was in middle school, and he would rattle off movie theme, like movie lines, or something he saw in one of his anime cartoons. It made no sense to me. I was stupid and I didn't get it. I didn't understand the impact it was having on him. I thought he was just being weird, to be honest, or obnoxious. And so I would try to correct him on it, not realizing that it's because he was taking all this in, the garbage in, and therefore the garbage was coming out. So this is my main mission, is to just warn people, because I don't want people to go through the hurt that I went through. I don't care which side of the aisle you sit on. If you're supportive of transgenderism or you're not, it's still a mourning of a death when somebody does a transition. My son will never be my son again. He will never be the child that I raised. I honestly can tell you, I think about it and I don't even know who he is anymore. I don't know him. That's a horrible feeling, especially when you only have one child. And I was a big failure at this, and that's why I want to make sure others are aware and really sober about it. So we'll move on. So you might be asking, what is anime and what is manga? Anime is basically animation. It's the short term for animation. It's hand-drawn and computer-generated animation originating out of Japan. If you know anything about Japan, they have a very strict culture about, like people say, modesty, about, gender roles and things like that. However, manga and anime are the rebellion to that. So in Japan, it's becoming more prominent in the open, but generally when it started, it was kind of underground. So they hid it. So it's kind of like, that's why I call it a subculture, because it's hidden during the day. It's something they do on the weekends or in their spare time. Manga is actually comic books. So I have an example of a book that's called manga, and it's called The Secret Lives of Geeks. I hope you can see it.
Yeah.
But these pictures, you notice the characters in the pictures. They have very large eyes. They have these schoolgirl outfits that you see on here are very common in manga, and also in anime. Sailor Moon is an anime that's super popular, and the main character in it is always in a schoolgirl. Sorry, I can't say that. Schoolgirl outfit. So, and there's sexual innuendo and things like that. So, but they always look like little kids, it seems like. So they keep children in a space of being perpetually children. Mm-hmm. You wonder why, and I'll talk about this in a little bit. There's a coffee shop in New York that has adult daycare. So, yeah. So
my word.
Young adults can go there, take a nap, they get ice cream, they get snacks, just like they would be in a kindergarten class. They do art, they do all these different things. like they're in a kindergarten class. And there's a huge draw for that. Why? Because these kids, let's think about it. The world is harsh. The world has become more degenerative to me over time from a morality standpoint, from even just, an ethical standpoint, from just being able to live and survive. It's not what it was when we were kids. And so I think they're looking for an outlet that's safe. You hear about safe spaces. They're being bombarded by these different social media attacks and the news and all these different things that we really weren't attacked with. So they're drawn to this. And I understand. I just don't think it's right. But like I said, Pokemon, everybody's heard of Pokemon. That's why I use that. It is an example of both manga and anime, and it also has a whole franchise. So there's merchandise and there's video games and all that kind of stuff. So that's what we're talking about here. There are different, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute too. There's different versions of manga and anime, and yaoi is one that is actually essentially called boy love. So it's gay young men in relationships. And then you see on the right here, there's an anime example. It's just the pictures, and if you watch anime at all, a lot of them have a lot of flashes. It's very flashy, very exciting, like nonstop action. And I will say this, I let my son watch a 30-minute Pokemon video one time. His dad bought him for him. He brought one home. I let him watch it one time. And my son was very low key and calm, usually, almost melancholy. And after watching that video, he was bouncing off the walls. One 30-minute video.
Wow.
And I said, no more, no more. So the effect that kind of stuff has on kids too is extreme. And then, the bottom line is, if you didn't know any better, you would think it's just comic books and cartoons. If you saw this book laying in your kid's room or in their book bag or something, it just looks like a comic book. And the pictures inside also look like a comic book. But these are not your typical comic books. I'm just saying. Okay, so
Crystal, that kind of reminds me, sorry to interrupt you, that kind of reminds me of the book called Genderqueer. Because it's basically a cartoon book. And that was one of the last pornographic books that we used to help repeal the obscenity exemption in Indiana. But that book is everywhere. That book is international even.
Yes. And a lot of this is because it's not just a subculture in the U.S. It's huge in the U.S. It's bigger in Japan. It's worldwide. It has spread like crazy. And I'm going to talk about some of the statistics of how much it's grown over time. And where it started. So I won't spend a lot of time on this background information. I just want people to understand this. Manga started in 1946. Rhonda, when I met you and we started talking about Alfred Kinsey, his books came out in 48 and 52. I could not believe it went back that far. And then after that, I watched the Shirley Temple episodes where she talked about what happened to her. And when was she a star? In like the 20s? I mean, this goes way back in time. And so manga started in 46. Anime actually started in 1916.
Wow.
And so notice that Osamu Tezuka started manga in 1946, but he was a Disney fan. There's that connection.
Wow.
We've talked about that so many times. He was a huge Disney fan. There's some of the different manga genres listed: yaoi, yuri, shoujo ai, shonen ai, bara, and we'll talk about some of those and what they mean, because I think parents need to know those terms. After I started looking at this, I remember my son saying some of those terms to me, and I had no idea what they were. Anime, 1916, Osamu Tezuka created the earliest commercial anime in 1946. The rise didn't start until like the 80s, so it didn't take root until the 80s, but it's just exponentially grown since then. Right now there's over 500 anime production companies in Japan, 48 in the US. I couldn't find any more updated numbers, but as of 2016, anime accounted for 60% of the world's animated TV. I would venture to say it's much more than that now. Okay, here's the different genres, and this is where I want people to pay attention. Yaoi is female characters that are minor characters. It focuses on homosexual relationships between men, rape, and tragic events. And this is the interesting thing. It's usually written by women and marketed to women.
Wow.
Yeah. Bara is another one. It focuses on male gay love with strong male physical characteristics. So it's not the typical, feminized men. It's, strong male physical characteristics, but it is male gay love. Shotacon is prepubescent or pubescent boys in romantic or pornographic relationships. Lolicon, you'll hear lolly mentioned, focuses on female characters of the same. So they're prepubescent or pubescent boys or girls. Do you remember Mr. Beast?
Mm-mm.
You've heard of Mr. Beast. Okay, he was a very big YouTube star. And his protege on this show decided to throw away his marriage to his wife, and I believe he had 3 kids because he was a fan of Lolly, and he decided to transition and live as a female. It came
Wow.
out later that he had charges against him. He was arrested for molesting kids. So, I mean, you can't, that's a grown man who was influenced by Lolly. What do you think it's doing to the kids?
Right.
Especially when they grow up with it, they think it's normal. And shame on us as parents for not being on top of this, including myself in that. Okay, so Omegaverse is male on male romance. It originated in America with Star Trek fandom. And it follows the yaoi genre. It became popular in 2010. It promotes a caste system of characters. So,
real quick, I just stop you right there.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
explain to me how it ties into Star Trek?
I can't. I cannot explain it. But who was I was attracted to Star Trek. I was a big fan of Star Trek. I watched it every day. I'm a big nerd. You know that, Rhonda. I'm just a big nerd. I get into stuff that's deep. Maybe I have some autistic characteristics. I'm not sure. But I was a big fan of it. And it's fantasy, right? So that's the only thing I can think that would connect it. Star Trek didn't have anything that I'm aware of that had any of this in it. But so Comic-Con, for example, and we'll talk about conventions a little bit too. But Comic-Con, I actually went to one with my son, and they had Adam West there. And he was on a panel, and you could go and see Adam West and ask questions and things like that. They always market people who were in fan shows like Star Trek or like Batman or like all these older shows.
Okay.
And so they'll always have those at like Comic-Con. And Comic-Con is another convention that you can cosplay. You show up in costumes. I mean, did you ever go to Indianapolis during Gen Con?
No.
Oh my gosh. We would drive around because the costumes were like fantastic. They spend so much money on these costumes. And it was weird but fun at the same time to see all these people walking around downtown Indianapolis in these cosplay costumes. There is the enemy always presents as light,
Mm-hmm.
correct?
Mm-hmm.
He makes things look fun and cute. And that's what I think is dangerous about this, because it's suppressing all of this stuff behind the scenes that I'm sharing now. That's
Right.
actually involved in this stuff once you get into it. It looks so cute. Like these comic characters are so cute. They have big eyes and they're so cute. And I know my son was into My Little Pony. I could not understand this, but he was into My Little Ponies, which is a little kid's cartoon. It is part of anime, by the way, that ponies have real big eyes. And it's all about like friendship and different values, they say. But there was, he mentioned to me he was a brony one time. I was like, what are you talking about? And come to find out, a brony is actually young adult men who are into My Little Ponies.
Oh
I'm
my
telling you, this
goodness.
stuff goes very deep, very deep.
Wow.
And I'm just touching the surface in this. So another genre is dom sub. You're going to be loving this one. This is bondage and dominance and sadomasochism.
That's Kinsey.
Uh-huh. And that's a whole genre of manga and anime. Shoujo is all explicit material. And so I list here on the slide some that target LGBTQ consumers and themes. So it's yaoi, yuri, shoujo ai, shonen ai, bara, etc. So you'll find that in all of these different genres. These aren't all the genres, they're just some of them, but I think they're the ones that I wanted to highlight the most because if you don't know anything about this stuff, which I didn't, and my son got into one of these genres, I would have no idea. No idea. So I just want to educate people about this. Here's some examples of anime and manga. People are going to know the ones on the left. Pokemon, Digimon, Yu-Gi-Oh! Naruto is a huge one right now. There's one called Berserk. Sailor Moon is huge right now. Dragon Ball, Hellboy. There are some on the dark side. I'm going to show some pictures of these. Just look at the names of them. Soul Eater, Chainsaw Man, Death Note, Assassination Classroom, Demon Slayer, Jujutsu Kaisen, which means everyone emanates cursed energy, and furries.
Oh, we hear a lot about the furries.
We do. And then Go Nagai was a manga author, and he was in this magazine that I had bought. He actually has a T-shirt on with a goat head. And one of his best known works is called Devil Man. I have a picture of him in the T-shirt in here, but just look at
Oh
some of these
my word.
pictures. There's Soul Eater, Death Note, Chainsaw Man. Look at the Chainsaw Man one. Does it not look androgynous?
Yeah.
The face kind
Wow.
of looks like a guy, but it has a bosom.
Right.
That Death Note one just creeps me out so bad, myself. And then what would Soul Eater be about even?
Right.
Here's some more. The Assassination Classroom. Look at the back of that, but like look how cute that looks. You see what the enemy's doing there?
There's a dark square up in that upper left hand corner, Crystal. Are you able to move that?
That's my view, so I
Oh,
can
is it?
move it.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. So yeah, look how cute that looks. And then you have Demon Slayer, and there's one, I want to eat your pancreas.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's go back to the assassination classroom because that one, I mean, we hear about we see some of these kids going and shooting up schools and classrooms but yet we have these kind of cartoons being put out for that attract them. Assassination classroom. I mean, that's pretty sick and twisted.
Yeah, all of them are. Demon Slayer, I mean,
Yep.
I guess I guess when I was young, I liked Halloween a lot, and I guess if we had goth back then, I might have been a little bit goth. I liked wearing black, and that was my favorite color, and but we didn't have goth. And I went to a Christian school, so I had to keep it on the down low. But like I loved Interview with the Vampire and stuff like that when I was a teenager, but I recognize now I can't watch any of that stuff. Like I don't want anything to do with any of it. But I think a lot of teenagers are naturally attracted. Look how popular the Scream movies are. And I don't know if you've noticed, but all the commercials for movies that are coming out, I've told my husband, I'm like, they're all so dark. Like, and very scary movies. I don't see a lot of good ones coming out. I
I
just
don't
don't.
watch
And
TV,
so,
so I don't see any of those.
yeah. Yeah, so there's a definite attraction by our youth to that kind of stuff, and I think it's just growing more and more. And this
Wow.
stuff feeds it, right? It feeds the monster. Here's satanic symbols that are actually in this fan book, by the way. The magazine that Rhonda spoke about that I found at the airport was on a feature in the gift store, which means facing outward, catching your attention. And it's not a Christian book, it's a fan book. It's for fans of anime and manga. So they're not hiding anything in this book.
No, I
And
was I was appalled at the symbols that were in that.
yeah, yeah. Well, I have some in here too, but yeah, there's triangles and crystals and Egyptian symbology and Yu-Gi-Oh, which Yu-Gi-Oh is the I want to say evolution from Pokemon. It's the next step up. So, you see that kind of stuff, the all-seeing eye, the Ankhs, the Egyptian Ankhs, and all that kind of symbolism. Again, Go Nagai has a picture where he has a goat head on his t-shirt in this magazine. There's so much witchcraft and sorcery and Egyptian symbology. The games for Pokemon are all labeled as crystals, different kinds of crystals or gems. So you have crystal, ruby, sapphire. There is a silver, there's a gold, but they're all related to that. And one thing that I didn't know until a few years ago, there are two trans villains in Pokemon.
Really?
I never knew that. The two villains in Pokemon are trans. And they're
Wow.
fluid, so they change outfits and things like that. Pokemon has a lot of stuff in it that I don't agree with. Their names are Jesse and James. You see that on here. There's the Go Nagai guy with the goat head on his t-shirt. You
Yeah.
see how it's a little bit different than the Baphomet head,
Yeah. But
but you can
still.
tell if you look at it, it's a
Yep.
goat head.
Yep.
You see the Egyptian symbols with Yu-Gi-Oh here, the
Hmm.
Ankh, all the all-seeing eye, all these different symbols. Even the one in the middle has the triangle on it. And it's just insane to me that it's all hidden in plain sight,
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
So let's talk about Pokemon a little bit more. Two villains, Jesse and James, are transgender. There's a character named Meowth, which sounds so cute, by the way, because, I was exposed to it because my son was into it. It's actually voiced by a trans trailblazer. Had no idea about that. Azrael started being assigned genders in Generation 2. And you think about the whole concept of Pokemon. This is how brilliant the enemy is, although our God is better, right? Our God is smarter and all knowing. But the enemy created a game where all the characters evolve into other characters. So as you play, you get different scores and weapons and things like that. And eventually you evolve into the next level. And all the characters have like 3 different evolution levels in them. Interestingly, one of the characters, Azrael, who was assigned genders in Gen 2, evolves into Meryl, who is gender split. And several of
And
the
word.
characters, as they evolve, they change genders. Now, even the kids that live next door to me, they're little, like 3rd grade down to 2 years old. There's 5 of them in that age range. And they play Pokemon. They have Pokemon cards. So it's just as popular, if not more, today as it was when my son was 3. This has been around so long.
Well, and what you're describing, Crystal, with them changing genders fluidly, that goes back to the Kinsey scale, where you could
Yep.
be anywhere from 0 to 6, either homosexual or heterosexual, and you could be anything in between at any given point in time. So
Mm-hmm.
this is all based on Kinsey's ideology as well.
Mm-hmm. And it's out of Japan.
Right.
That's where it
Wow.
started. Pokemon X and Y, those are 2 different games, video games, and Shauna in the game is bisexual based on the avatar that you pick. So you could be like, let's say I pick a female avatar for me because I'm a female. When I play the game, Shauna is a character that I play with, but she's a romantic interest. So then you've got me as a female with a romantic interest in a female.
Wow.
And also think about the whole fact, and I know people are going to say I'm crazy for this. I overthink things, and I get that. But think about the fact with video games in particular, you pick your avatar, you pick who you want to be. And so boys can be girls and girls can be boys. It's not a problem at all. You pick who
Mm-hmm.
you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so just even that concept of the video gaming world was an awakening for me too. But there's more. Those are just the things I decided to highlight.
Well, and that goes right along with,
Um,
okay, so that goes right along with the schools that we know have been teaching kids that you might be born in the wrong body. If you feel like you're a
yep.
boy in a girl's body. I mean, that happened with Erin Lee in Colorado. That happened with her daughter being sent to an after school art club, and they had an LGBTQ individual come in and teach in this after school art club all about LGBTQ. And in 90 minutes, the girl started thinking that she was a boy and she was in the wrong body.
Yes.
Wow.
And I'm going to add to that and say, be watchful parents of your art teachers, your drama teachers, your choir directors,
Yes.
because those are the liberal arts classes are the ones that are all about self-expression. Express yourself. You should be able to express yourself however you want to. And those are the ones where, Rhonda, you remember, the art teacher, there was a family that came up to us at one event. There was a litter box in the art room, and someone had used it. And everybody kept blowing everything off like, oh, that was one report. Well, it was one report out of Michigan to start with, and they debunked that one. But it didn't mean that it wasn't happening, because I had so many parents come up and talk to me about how it was happening at their school. And in that particular case, their child was with them when we talked about it. They came up to me after one of our events and talked to me about it. And so I would caution people, watch the liberal arts classes for your kids.
Yeah, I just wish we could have gotten a picture out of that classroom, but
I
unfortunately
know.
they had pulled their child out at that point.
No, did you? No. So the child had exposed it to their parents, and the parents
Right?
called the school, and then she got COVID. And at the time, she was supposed to be excused for COVID, right? And they sent homework home for her to do and all that. Well, they came back later because the parents had contacted them and said that she wasn't going to be able to graduate because she wasn't up to date on her work, because they didn't send everything home for homework.
Wow.
And she was a senior that year. Well, then the parents caused such a stink that the school came back and said, we're going to let your daughter graduate early, and totally flipped because they wanted that family out of the school. They didn't want them to talk. They didn't want it exposed.
I forgot
So
all about that.
they actually let her graduate early so they could
Yeah,
get rid
you're
of
right.
her. Craziness. Okay, for this part, I'm just talking about kind of the history of it, but I say here by 2006 there were 130 English translated works of yaoi, and we talked about yaoi earlier, what that means. The first one was introduced in North America in 2003. Between 2006 and 2007, 10 publishers offered yaoi works, but now there are almost 10,000 works of yaoi. I just looked this up today and updated my stats. 10,000 since 2007. That's a lot. And then among the 135 yaoi published in North America between 2003 and 6, 14% were rated for readers aged 13 years or over, 39% were rated for readers aged 15 or over, and 47% were rated for readers age 18 and up. Okay, think about that. I want to focus on the 14% that were for age 13 or over. Do you think that only 13-year-olds and up are going to get these books in the school library? Do you think they're going to be restricted from getting them if they're underage at the public library?
Nope.
And what about book fairs?
Yep.
They
So
don't restrict them there.
Crystal, have you taken a look at who the publishing companies are of these books? Because we looked at the 5 big publishing companies of all the pornography that was in the schools and libraries and found that they had direct connections to the United Nations and the World Economic Forum.
Interesting. I have not. I haven't gone that far. This is enough for me. Like,
That might be another avenue
oh
we need
my
to look at.
gosh. Yeah, we might need to go down that lane. Um, I have a couple of videos here, and Rhonda, maybe if you have a description or something, if this goes on YouTube, you can put the link on there, but I won't try to play them here. But these are first person accounts, these two videos of how um, anime and manga help them gender transition. The first one is a first person account of that. The second one is a girl who went to a convention with her friend and met an older man, and then he kidnaps her and he makes her dress like a cat and he abuses her, and she ends up getting out of it. But it's also a first person account. They're in cartoon form because why? Because they're into anime
Of
and they're at a
course.
convention. Yeah, so it's all part of the same thing.
Yeah, if you send
And
us
then
those links, we'll put those in the description.
Okay. And then the other one here, the article is about this doctor who claimed anime makes people trans. He got shut down by Twitter. They just shut him off. It's censorship. And that's just typical, isn't it?
Yep.
We know stuff like that happens all the time. Okay, so we'll go on to, oops, sorry. Okay, so this one is bringing in the cosplay and conventions and video games and furries and linking all that together. These are some furries. These are characters most likely out of an anime or manga medium. But all of these things are part of the subculture. And so I want to highlight that. We're not talking about just anime and manga. We're not talking about just video games. We're talking about conventions where they meet people like them. There's a whole community of people out there at these conventions that they go and they become friends with and they play with video games on Xbox or PlayStation or whatever. The furries is a big part of that culture. Chat rooms, online forums. Again, the autism spectrum disorder. People are really drawn to this whole thing. And then, of course, you have the arts. It's all connected. So here's some terms to know. Again, if your kids are talking about this stuff, you better know about it. Cosplay is a blend of costume and play. That's what that stands for. But they dress up as characters. That can be furries. Okay, so cosplay and furries can go hand in hand. On the furry thing, I'm going to tell you guys something. When I wasn't living for God, I was in my early 20s. This was in the early 90s. There was a show called Real Sex on HBO, and it had to be 19 actually it was the late 80s. It had to be in 1988 or 89 that I saw an episode about furries on that show. Um, it was a sexual fetish back then. People
Wow.
think it's a new thing. It's not a new thing. I watched an episode of that. You can find it probably online if you look at the Wayback Machine or something, or maybe somebody's posted an episode of it. But it was called Real Sex on HBO, all about furries, and it was a sexual fetish. And now look what we have now. We have kids running around in furry costumes, acting like cats, acting like dogs, acting like animals, which I go back to. They've been taught they're animals through evolution for so many decades. Why not act like an animal? Like Dr. Phil says, I don't ask myself why not. I ask myself, or why. I ask why not. Why wouldn't they act like animals? We've taught them they are through evolution. And so furry is a fan of human-like animal characters, and they dress as the characters. They act as the characters. Otaku is a person highly knowledgeable about a hobby or subculture and who might be skilled in technology, basically a nerd, but that's part of this culture. A chibi, my son used to say that all the time. I had no idea what he was saying. Is a cute kid version of an anime character. Post-con depression. These are some of the things that are negative that come out of it. There's a thing called post-con depression. It's returning to the humdrum of everyday life from a place that one might be treated like a rock star. When they go to these conventions, I told you they're with people that are like-minded. they're with their community. If they have costume contests, they're embraced. Everything's all fun for the time that they're at the convention, and then they go back to real life. And so that's something that's known in the community as post-con depression. Con plague, on the other hand, is an illness one catches after several days of being in close contact with multitudes of people, not eating well and not getting enough sleep. That's another thing that's accepted in the community and talked about. So they have their own language. And then glomping, my son used to say this too, is an aggressive tackle hug. So I'm just using these as examples of not just things that are in the culture, but the language that they use. They even have their own language.
Well, Crystal, this feeds into the whole mental health instability that we're seeing.
Yes. Yes. I told you they live as children. I did an episode on my podcast about this, and the producer of it, he and his wife, and his daughter was probably 12 or 13 at the time. But they would sit and watch anime together and didn't see anything wrong with it. I noticed when I was around his wife and his daughter, they baby talked. Like all the time, they baby talked, and they acted like a child with each other. And so I noticed that. Well, I didn't say anything because I'm friendly with them, they're acquaintances. But they're also a Christian family. And so then I just got a call a few months ago that their daughter, who's now 14, is having gender confusion. Mm-hmm. And at the time I did the episode, the producer kind of made fun of me. Not to my face, but he just kind of, it was very, I'm going to blow you off. This is dumb. You're overreacting. And so when this happened, that their daughter exhibited gender confusion and had to talk with them about it, it was one of those tuck-tail kind of conversations. Mm-hmm. So it's affecting even the Christian community. And I had this presentation. I took this book, and we were starting a group at our church, and I had a backboard, and I had pictures like this on there, and I had the magazine laying there. And we had a missionary that was visiting with his wife, and he came up and he's like, "So what's this about?" And so I started talking to him about it. And he said, "Well, my wife and I watch it. We don't see anything wrong with it." And not only did they watch it, but they watched Sailor Moon, which is one of the worst as far as the sexual content. And wow. So, yeah. So I felt like I was on the spot. And the only thing I could say is, you're adults and you can do what you want. My concern is for the kids. I mean, so it's in the churches. My brother-in-law is a pastor of a small one in Florida, and I'd been talking to them about this for a while because of my son's situation. It's my sister, and I kept hearing, we don't have that here. Until last summer, they took their kids to church camp, and my brother-in-law was on the bus and heard two little girls talking, and one of them said, "I can't wait to get home and watch my anime."
Wow.
And a light bulb went off. And so then I happened to go down and visit, and they said, "Can you present here?" And I said, "Yeah." They gave the church the option of going to the regular service or going to the fellowship hall and hearing me talk about this. Only 5 people went to the regular service, and there were about 50 in the fellowship hall.
Wow.
And I had to counsel a lady for like an hour afterwards who was just tore up because she didn't know any of this, and her nephew transitioned, and the family didn't know, so he was into all this. They had no idea. So she was going through the guilt that I went through because I also felt a lot of guilt for not being smart about this and not following up and paying attention. And then there was a town supervisor that was there, and he ended up speaking up about how much it was in the schools. So it's everywhere. Okay, so now let's talk numbers. 1 in 5 video games are LGBTQ plus friendly. I don't think people know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
I really don't. which is about 17%, or 75,000 to 120,000 video games have it. There's over 96,000 published manga books with LGBTQ plus themes. 15,000 new manga volumes were published in Japan just in 2024 alone.
Oh my word, that's a lot.
Yeah. There were over 70,000 attendees at Gen Con this year in Indianapolis. And there were over 750,000 in attendance at Comic Con this year. Now, Comic Con's a little different because they have a main one in San Francisco, but then they have Comic Cons all around the world. So the total global was 750,000. And the attendance at conventions has increased approximately 20,000 per year. So this is a huge industry, folks. I just can't say enough about it. The revenue from manga in 2024 was $15.8 billion. And from anime, it was $81.96 billion. This is pervasive in our culture, and people just don't know. The yaoi boy love, the 2024 total on that was 11 million just in revenue. For manga new sales, they went up 4.65 billion in 2024 over the year before. There's CDs that are out there with video games and different media. The numbers for 2024 was 2.2 billion in revenue. Video games was $182.7 billion globally. Yeah. Okay. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the autism spectrum, because this really hurts my heart a lot. The enemy presents as light. The enemy presents as cute and fun and entices people. And I feel like while the creators of these medium may not have targeted the people on the autism spectrum disorder, the enemy knew.
Mm-hmm.
It's exploitive. And that makes me very sad. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. According to Forbes magazine, in 1981, 10% of 30 children with autism had trouble answering the question of whether they were a boy or a girl, compared to less than 1% of neurotypical children. Gender dysphoria was found later in 5 to 54% of those diagnosed with autism, depending on the study. 60 to 90% of gender dysphoria among autistic people are no longer gender dysphoric 10 years or so later.
Wow.
We're damaging these kids.
Yeah, we are.
Completely
Absolutely.
damaging them. And we're allowing it. We're not fighting this. I'm trying to, and thank you for getting this out there, Rhonda, because it needs to be said. A 2014 U.S. study of 147 children ages 6 to 18 at U.S. hospital-based neuropsychology clinic in Washington, D.C. showed autism spectrum kids were 7.6 times more likely for gender dysphoria, and ADHD kids were 6.6 times higher than neurotypical kids. So, my question is, do you know anyone who's been affected through anime and manga personally? You might, and you may not even know it.
Right.
You may not even know it. Why do autistic people love anime? Number one, escape from reality. Remember, we were talking about that, how the world is so harsh that they just want to escape. Number two is friendship lessons. I found this interesting because what I found in my studies is, and this plays into number three also, easy to read emotionally. Autistic people can't read social cues. They're not very good at it. They tend to act awkward in social situations. They tend to not be able to understand facial expressions very well. These characters have the big eyes. I showed you a picture of that. You can see it on some of the pictures on here. They always seem to have these really big eyes, and they emote really well. And so the autistic people on the spectrum can relate to it and learn from it more. And that's one of the attractions. Another one is the formality of Japanese culture. Anime equals community. We've talked about that. They demonstrate through these relatable struggles. Now, I want to stop there for a second, because define relatable struggles. Rhonda, when we were testifying on the obscenity, what was the main objection to us in general from the Library Association? You can't pull these books because there are kids that are going through this and they need the
Right.
books to relate. I would
Yep.
argue they're not teaching them how to handle it, though.
Mm-hmm.
They might be relatable. Um, some of the books that we've talked about before, oh my gosh, there's one called Crack that the whole book is full of, or Crank, I'm sorry,
Crank.
Crank.
Yep. Crank.
The whole book is full of a first person account of a young girl with a father who's a drug addict and alcoholic, and she does drugs with them. There's molestation, there's rape, there's all these different things in that book, and that's in the school libraries, and that was what we were fighting for, to take it out. There is not one shred of anything in that book that would give any kind of advice on how to handle those things. It was
Right.
just an account of the things that happened. There was no educational value. It didn't tell them how to deal with it even. Now, I don't know. I guess there's parents out there that want their kids to read about that kind of stuff. I was not one of those parents. If there's kids in this school that are going through those problems, they shouldn't be reading a book about it to explain it in great detail of how those things occur. They should be talking to a counselor. Even then, I'd be scared of that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
A book is a book that tells them how to do all those things is not the answer.
Well, and
So
then you've got an individual who may not know what's in that book, picks that book up, and they've been traumatized by that abuse, and it triggers them and sends them off the deep end, or gives them flashbacks, or I just can't. I can't.
that's why I focus on those verses at the beginning.
Yeah.
Control your imaginations.
Mm-hmm.
When you read a book, your imagination is active.
Right.
You're picturing what you're reading. I don't know about you, but when I read a book, it's like I'm seeing a movie in my head. I'm imagining it all. You want kids to live there because those are seeds that are planted that are going to take root and become thoughts, and those thoughts are going to become actions. So, again, the relatable struggles piece, I'm a little not okay with. And then the anime does confront bullying. There's a lot of it that has that value in there. And so that's another attraction, because a lot of these kids are bullied. These kids that are into the gaming, into the anime, into the manga, into the cosplay, all of that, they are bullied because they don't fit the norm. I don't want to say they're not normal.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a good way to word it, but they don't fit the norm. They're not sports jocks. They're not popular. They're not, they're kind of on the fringe. And then anime equals information for them. And we know that autistic people love information. They love facts.
Mm-hmm.
They want to know more and more and more. So those are the 8 top reasons that they love anime. This was just recommendations from a furry fandom website to interested people. There are different, if you don't know about these social media sites, you need to. They advise them to use Discord, Skype, and Telegram for instant messaging. They advise them to search on Facebook, X, and Instagram and YouTube for communities. You won't know about it. Reddit has a subthread that's r/furry, and I actually follow that group. Just like I follow the trans group and I follow a detrans group, because I want to know what they're saying. I don't interact with them. I just get content from them because they think they're all friends on here, right? It's all part of the community. I'm not. I'm infiltrating, but I get content. So
Well, you have to know your enemy in order to know how to fight your enemy.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And I have to know the enemy to tell other people about what the enemy's doing, because
exactly,
that's my ministry. That's my mission.
Yep.
There's a mobile app called Furry Amino.
I was just reading that.
Websites called So Furry and Fur Affinity. They advise people to create an account and start commenting, posting, and connecting with other users. It's easy to get involved in discussions there. You can easily find other furries via Tumblr and DeviantArt too. So is there other sites that they're into? And the highlighted part is a quote: "The furry community is a place where all kinds of people can really fit in, especially those who often don't feel like they fit in." What have we been talking about,
Yep.
right? I would argue that I don't know of any kid who at some point doesn't feel like they fit in.
Right.
I mean, all of us did.
Everybody
It's
wants
like,
community. Everyone wants to feel
yeah,
like a belonged. They belong
hmm
somewhere. Yep.
yeah. It's just they're too young to realize they belong until they don't.
Right.
And when they don't, it's hurtful, hurtful. You've been accepted in this community. You've been embraced by this community. They love you until you go against something they say.
Right.
And then it's done. And that, if you think about autistic people on the autism spectrum disorder um, list, that's going to damage them more than anything. Like, they already feel like they don't fit in, so now they're doing things to fit in, and they're being embraced, but then one day they get older and they decide, oh, this isn't really for me. Imagine the hurt and damage that does when they're cut off.
Mm-hmm.
It's, to me, it's exploitive and it's despicable in my mind.
Well, it's just like the evil. Evil will do that.
Yes, yes, very much. This is what I was talking about earlier. There's a manga store in Birmingham and Glasgow, and there's a BBC documentary that goes into it. And this particular manga store has Calm Tuesdays to cater to those who are overstimulated, and they play softer music, and they have calmer staff, etc. They treat it like a kindergarten. Well, this one doesn't, but the one in New York does, treats it like a kindergarten class. You go in and do art, and you play games, and you take naps, and you get snacks, and it's just like attending a preschool or a kindergarten. These are all over the place, but this one in particular, I watched the documentary on, and I was like, oh my gosh. Okay, so there's a couple of things here that I want to mention, references. Jen Specht is a good one to follow. I'm sure you are aware of that, Rhonda.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's a Christian professional organization, and they're fighting for against the push for transgenderism, and they report on updates, and that's a really good one to follow. WPATH is the bad guy.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This is the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. They're considered a professional authority for transgenderism, but they are very secular, but they are also a global authority, at least considered that. And I love the whole thing that happened during COVID, and it's just continued to happen. Trust the experts.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like trust Kinsey. He's the expert.
Yeah.
Now look what we're dealing with.
Exactly. And that's what's going on with this too. They're self-proclaimed, I think.
Yep.
On detransitioners, I just want to highlight some of these things really quickly, because this is where we hope it ends, right? We hope people, if they get into this community and they transition, and we hope they come out of it and detransition eventually, even though that's going to be hard. But 87% of people that detransition selected more than one reason for detransitioning. I thought that was interesting, because most of the time you would think there might be one main one, but that's a lot of people. But the most common reason, 60%, was just becoming more comfortable identifying with their birth sex, which we know after puberty they will.
Right.
I can speak to that directly, because I was a tomboy, and when I started developing, if you know what I mean, I was like horrified. And I was sad, and I cried a lot. If I were growing up today, they would have rushed me into that. My
Right.
parents wouldn't have, but the schools would have probably. The second reason was having concerns about potential medical complications from transitioning, and that came in at 49%. So that was the second biggest reason for detransing. There was a quote expert that noted that those who became more comfortable with their natal sex, which is their birth sex, he said the finding adds further support that gender dysphoria is not always permanent. We know that.
Hmm.
But I guess we need an expert to tell us that, so I listed it here. Don't take my word for it. I'm
Yeah.
nobody, right?
Yeah.
Um, but he also noted that because most gender dysphoric youth who are allowed to go through puberty grow up to be lesbian, gay, or bisexual, non-transgender adults, intervening too soon with medical treatments risks derailing their development as LGBT individuals.
Wow.
I, yeah, yeah. I don't like that at all because I don't think that has to be the case. But that's what they said. And then reflecting on their previous identification as transgender, more than a third of respondents reported that someone else told them their feelings meant they were transgender and they believed them.
Wow.
So again, it's all emotions nowadays, it seems
Right.
like.
Yep. All part of social emotional learning too, which we know social emotional learning pushes a lot of this LGBT agenda.
Absolutely. There's a big connection there. Big
Absolutely, there is.
connection. Um, I'm not going to go through these. I think, I can provide you the slides or something if people want to see this, but I just think it's interesting content from people who, again, I found it on the Reddit subthreads.
Which is a great place for people if they want to really start delving into this. That's a great place for them to go.
It is because they tell their stories and it's heartbreaking. You have to be prepared for it because it's heartbreaking. I might just read the first one. So this one said, I'm just speaking from experience, but I know I'm also on the autistic spectrum. And I'm actually a special ed teacher now as well. And it's really common for kids on the autism spectrum to love anime and cartoons that borrow in style. It's generally the large eyes and melodramatic monologues, as I was talking about, that make it very easy for me and people like me to pick up on emotional cues and actually tell how people are feeling instead of just guess like I normally do. I don't know how much it applies here, but I remember reading once that apparently it's more common for people on the autistic spectrum to be trans. And that's somebody that detransed, and they're talking about that. I guess another one for me, there are many animes and mangas about transgender, about other gender identities. I love reading these as they portray my dream of being born female, such as cross dressing or gender bender stuff.
Wow.
Um, some of the female to male to female ladies I've spoken with were influenced by yaoi, and that's one of the genres I talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, and I just like to throw these in because I like people to be aware of what they're saying out there. But I encourage everyone to go look. Just be prepared if you're going to jump on Reddit and join the sub thread for the detrans community. The stories are heartbreaking because these people have already gone through a lot of surgical transition. They're damaged for life. They're kind of left on their own because again, so what happens when people decide to detrans? Let's start with what they do when they decide to trans. They go to the doctor, right? And they have to go frequently because they have to keep their appointments up to get their hormones and to get their surgeries and all that kind of stuff. So they're in the medical system. When they decide to detrans, they just stop going. And that's why we don't have statistics on how many detrans people there actually are, because no one follows up. And I've heard several of them testify that their doctors never reached out to them. They stopped going thinking that, they just wanted to detrans, but they kind of expected their doctors to call and find out why they weren't coming in, and they don't. They just kind of fall off into the abyss and they're left on their own. So it's very sad to me.
Well, and I've heard some of the stories, Crystal, that people have gone to the surgical side of it and how the infections that they deal with for the life and the medications that they have to be on to deal with that is just it's horrendous.
Insane. But look who makes all the money off that, Rhonda.
Big pharma.
Big pharma. Yeah, and not just that, but like if you're a male to female, you have to use a device every single day to open yourself back up because it wants to close. And that causes infections, and that causes problems with even urinating. So just imagine that. I know I am Jazz Jennings.
Hmm.
Even her mom was pushing her to keep going. She didn't want to. She's a grown adult now, and she wanted to get out of it. She didn't want to do it anymore. And her mom was telling her, "You have to." Her mom was threatening her and everything. I say her
Wow.
loosely. But she talked about how she was tired of doing this device that you have to. It's imagine using what is the device for pap smears? This I forget the name of it,
Yeah, I
but
don't know what it's called.
yeah, but imagine having to use one of those every day to stretch yourself out again because your body knows it's not supposed to be like that and it tries to close back up. It's
Right.
just, it's so exploitive and disrespectful to people and despicable, and all because of money, in my opinion.
Right. Yep.
All because of money. Even looking at John Money when he started this whole transgender thing, what was he looking for? He was looking for fame.
Right.
That's
Yep.
what he was doing it for. He wanted notoriety and fame. Um, I think Kinsey was the same way. Hugh Hefner was doing it for money,
Hmm. Yep.
obviously,
Well,
but
the
but
sad
it's
thing is
all
they were,
exploitive.
yeah, and the sad thing is, I mean, Kinsey and Hugh Hefner, I mean, they were part of the CIA network. Um,
Yes,
yeah, but it's just it's sick and twisted when you start really looking at who's really behind this.
right, right. I want to highlight something I say on this slide though, because I haven't talked about this yet, and it's really important. Um, with the anime and manga, if you were any kind of parent like I was, you might watch a couple episodes of something that your son or daughter was into all of a sudden. You might watch a couple episodes just to check it out and make sure it's okay for them to watch. Let me assure you, the enemy knows that. And they won't put this content in the first few episodes. They're not going to do that. They stick the content in several episodes in. Let's say there's actually, a series that has 100 episodes. You might find this content in episode 23, 35, 56. It's throughout that whole thing. And unless you're actually sitting with your child and watching it nonstop with them when they're watching it, you won't ever see it. At the presentation I made at the church in Florida, I had a parent speak up, and her daughter was watching Sailor Moon, and she didn't know that it was any. Again, she thought it was like a cartoon, like I did. But she happened to be walking through the room one day, and she happened to catch part of it, part of the content that was dealing with the LGBTQ plus agenda. And so she verified what I was saying at that event because she would have never known. She said if I had not walked through the room when that happened, I would have never known. And so just be thinking about that. I I have a problem like I know a lot of people like to watch like Family Guy and these adult cartoons. I don't get that. I'm not attracted to them at all. But there are a lot of people who are, and it seems like it should just be so benign as a cartoon. But even the adult cartoons have content in it that I'm horrified by when I hear it. So imagine what it does to your kids. I'm just saying. Um, so that's really the end of it. I have some thoughts that I'll share. Knowing the growth in genres of anime and manga that contain LGBTQ plus themes, these are just things for you to think about. Do you think it has had an effect on our children and culture? Another one, the industry is growing and judging from the money being made. Do you think it may be money driven? I believe that when it comes to children, seeds get planted, curiosity takes hold, and the thoughts take root and grow into actions. I said that before. I'm going to keep saying that. Be careful what your kids are exposed to. And don't let just one time slip away. Don't be dismissive about it. You get tired. They might keep begging you and asking you and begging you and asking you, but don't get worn down because the risk is just too high to me. And then here I talk about the SEL, Rhonda.
Nope.
Knowing that the kids drawn to this industry are often the misfits or at-risk kids, can you see how SEL is used to address these kids? And how that fits in with the content of these mediums. And then I ask people, do you actually know anyone who's been affected through anime or manga? There are hands that get raised when I talk to people about this because they do. They don't when they come to this because they have no idea what it means. They just know the term anime manga. They have no idea what it means.
Right.
When I start talking about Pokemon, everybody knows about Pokemon. So,
yeah. So a couple of things, Crystal, on your thoughts. The money. We know that the money has been used to push this entire sexual perversion. We know the Rockefellers were behind Kinsey. We know the CIA was behind Kinsey. We know that they wanted to destroy the moral fiber of the nation.
yes.
Not only of the nation, but they've destroyed the moral fiber of the entire world at this point.
Yes.
And now that we are connected internationally, and you mentioned the UK, you mentioned Canada, I think you mentioned some of these other countries. And so my colleagues, when this goes out, my colleagues across the world are probably going to want to talk to you because some of them probably do not understand the depths of this. And then secondly, let's talk about the social emotional learning aspect of this. And I just want to tie this into Indiana. And here's why. So I uncovered through the research I had done when our local school passed a referendum several years ago in Indiana that required mental health counselors. I wasn't able to stop it. The referendum passed, and I filed an open records request with our school, and I received a binder, 3-inch binder full of emails, charts, graphs, reports of what the Lilly Counseling Initiative of I call it bribe money, did.
Yeah.
And here's how that laid out. And you know this, but for the sake of the audience, I'm going to walk people through that. Okay. So that money doled out. And what I found was all of that big pharma money from Lilly Pharmaceutical, headquartered in Indianapolis. They had joined forces with the Gates Foundation and set up the Center for Excellence in Leadership of Learning, CELL, at the University of Indianapolis to transform education. What they did was they transformed it through social emotional learning.
Yes.
So what that grant money did when Lilly doled that out to all of the schools that received the grant money, what that did was it required those schools to go on 3 years of training, 6 days annually, with a radical who was tied to Obama and Arne Duncan's Department of Education. Well, we know a lot about Obama's lifestyle at this point. And this woman, Trish Hatch, is a far left radical LGBTQ advocate. She is a former
probably.
Right. She's a former vice president of American School Counselors Association. And she was training all the schools on those position statements of ASCA. And I tell people repeatedly, you've got to go and read the position statements of ASCA, American School Counselor Association, because those position statements are where the devil's in the details of pushing this LGBTQ agenda into the schools. And Trish Hatch wasn't just in Indiana. She was all over the country. She's been down here in Texas. She's been everywhere, pushing and training the schools on how to push social emotional learning and the LGBTQ agenda through social emotional learning. And I have all the documentation to back that up, and I have a whole presentation that I will update at some point soon, and laying all that out again. But that coincides with what you're saying with this whole anime and manga push, and it's very, very disturbing. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Do you remember when I infiltrated and went undercover to
I
the
do.
public school event for employees of the public schools. I believe I was the only one there who wasn't an employee of a public school, but it was open to the public, so I paid the fee and I went. I sat in on a breakout session for SEL, and it was the Hamilton County Super that spoke about how they implement SEL. And I found this so intriguing. So, again, know your enemy. They do it under cover, basically. So, like in the mornings, they had homeroom, and the teachers would have all their kids stand in a big circle. What other thing do you know that has a ritual of circle standing?
Yep.
They would stand in a big circle and they would go over the value for the day. And then the kids would disperse and go to their classes, and every teacher throughout the day would interject that value somehow into their curriculum. Off the record, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because parents can only see the curriculum. They don't know what's being said in the classroom. They don't know what's being shown in the classroom. They don't know the books that they moved from the school libraries to their classrooms, so they weren't cataloged.
Right.
And so that's how they did it through the school system there. And honestly, like, I get why people would think SEL is benign. It's a good thing, because when you look at the values that they have on their schedule, there was one for every day. Sounds like a great thing, right? Respect others. Who wouldn't want their kids to respect others? Until you have a kid in the classroom that's Johnny, but he wants to be called Jenny, and he's transing, and if you don't accept it, you're not exhibiting the value of respect others.
Right.
And they're forcing the kids to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, to me, again, the enemy presents in light, and the darkness comes out in the end. But you have to dig to find the darkness sometimes.
Yeah, and shine the big old light on it.
Yes, people just kind of settle in with the obvious and the shallow level. They don't really dig deep.
Well, so, and one of the things that I had said to Dr. Judith Reisman, who was the leading expert on Kinsey, right? And she kept repeatedly asking me if I knew about, and she referred to MK Ultra. Yeah, the Kinsey Sex and Fraud. Yeah. And so she repeatedly would refer to MK Ultra, the CIA program, which Kinsey participated in. You can go to our website and look at the article or the white paper she and I worked on to tie it all together. And I said to her, I didn't know about it. And so I started watching YouTube videos, and she told me to start research it. So I did. I started delving into it. And I remember calling her back very distinctly and nearly in tears and saying, Judith, MK Ultra didn't end in the 70s when they said it did. It went underground and resurfaced in the schools as social emotional learning. And she said, you, my dear, are 100% correct. And so it did. It absolutely did. And that is essentially what social emotional learning is thought reform. That was the whole point of the MK Ultra experiments, was behavior modification and thought reform. And that was a CIA program.
Yes. And they tell you that it's behavior modification.
Yep.
In fact, in that session, they don't discipline kids. They make them sit together and talk it out and try to work it out. And it's all about behavior modification.
Yep.
Period.
And I'm currently reading through one of the committee papers where they're talking about when they uncovered additional papers from the 70s, because the CIA tried to destroy a lot of the MK Ultra documents, but there were some that had been put in a different site outside of DC, and so somebody uncovered those years later. And part of this document that I'm reading is a government document of a committee hearing, and they're talking about these documents and what they uncovered and what this program was really all about. And it was all behavior modification, as we've just mentioned. And so that is essentially what this anime manga stuff is. It's all behavior modification. It's all thought reform. It's all perverting morality. It's perverting minds. It's destroying bodies. And so it all ties together.
It does.
Into all of this sexual revolution agenda that Kinsey, the CIA, the Rockefellers all launched. And so I think having this interview with you was very timely, just upon the return of our trip to DC. And so, in fact, Audrey Warner and I will be flying back out. It sounds like in a couple of weeks to go back and have further discussion on Kinsey, the CIA, and MK Ultra connections. And so this interview with you was very timely, and I didn't know that was all going to transpire when you and I had initially booked to do this. So it's very interesting to be able to tie this all together with it as well. So I just want to thank you, Crystal, for everything you've done to expose this.
Thank you. I appreciate the audience, because I feel like I'm the only one out there. As I mentioned to you before, I heard Matt Walsh mention it one time on a podcast, and I've heard some others like briefly mention it, but that nobody's talking about the depth of it. And I think it's important people understand this is a huge, huge group of people. It's a huge community. It's continuing to grow. You can see that from the statistics. The money that's being poured into it is insane to me. The money they're making off of it is insane to me. But ultimately, I just want to protect our kids.
Right.
And again, it's not coming from a place of judgment of other people. I can't do that. I failed. But what I can do is take that and warn others about what this is all about and the impact it had on me personally and my son, who I may never talk to again on this earth. I will never have grandkids. I will never, any of that. And yeah, it's a dark place to be, and I get sad sometimes, but I feel like the Lord is using this as an opportunity to help more people.
Yeah.
I can't stay in my own little situation. I have to spread it. I have to tell people. The house is on fire.
Yep.
I have to tell people, get out of the house. It's on fire.
Yep. I agree.
So,
well, I'll tell you what, if you, yeah, absolutely. And we may come back to this in a few weeks, few months, and touch on this again. If you want to send me any of the links, Crystal, that we can attach in the description so people can go and they can do their own research just to start, please feel free to do that. I'll get those out to people and then they can start doing their own research. So,
okay, perfect.
Thank you again, Crystal, for coming on tonight.
Thank you.